Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Easy Talk, the podcast where we explore the fascinating corners of human culture, language, and society to help you speak English with real confidence, real depth, and real understanding. I'm Jane.
And I'm Mike. Hey, everybody. So great to have you here with us today. Whether this is your very first Easy Talk episode or you've been with us through every single one, we are genuinely delighted you're here.
If you're new to Easy Talk, welcome. Here's what we're about. We take real, meaningful topics from the real world, cultural traditions, global events, history, language itself, and we explore them in English so that you're not just learning grammar and vocabulary in the abstract, you're learning to think, to discuss, to understand, and to connect with people across cultures.
And to our Easy Talk regulars, you are the reason this channel keeps growing. Your comments, your questions, your perspectives from Tehran and Kabul and Toronto and Sydney and everywhere in between make every episode richer. Thank you.
Quick reminder before we start, please subscribe to our channel right now if you haven't already. Hit that thumbs up button and turn on notifications. It genuinely helps us reach more people, and every person who finds Easy Talk because you clicked that button is someone whose English and whose understanding of the world gets a little better. That matters to us.
And stay with us all the way to the end today because we have a question for you in the comments that I think is going to spark one of our best conversations ever. Trust me on this one.
Ready, Mike? Because today's topic is one that I have been wanting to do for a long time. It is a topic that is deeply personal to millions of people, that has fascinated linguists and anthropologists and sociologists for decades, and that, when you understand it, fundamentally changes the way you think about communication, politeness, and what it means to say yes or no.
That's a bold setup. I'm genuinely curious now.
Today, we are talking about Taarof, Taarof. And if you already know what Taarof is, if you grew up with it, if it's part of your daily life, I think you're going to love hearing it explained in English. And if you've never heard this word before, prepare to have your understanding of human communication genuinely expanded.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning, because I'm in the camp of people who've heard the word but couldn't give a confident definition. What is Taarof?
Taarof is a Persian, specifically Iranian, system of elaborate ritual politeness and courtesy. It is a complex, sophisticated social code that governs how people interact, how they offer and decline things, how they express respect and humility, and how they navigate the delicate landscape of social relationships. It is deeply embedded in Iranian culture and the Persian language, and it is one of the most fascinating examples of how a culture can encode its deepest values into the very structure of everyday communication.
So it's not just a word for being polite, it's a whole system.
A whole system with rules, conventions, layers of meaning, and consequences for getting it wrong. And what makes Taarof particularly fascinating, especially for English speakers, is that it operates on a principle that is almost the opposite of what Western English-speaking cultures tend to value in communication. In most Western communication norms, particularly American English, clarity and directness are virtues. Say what you mean what you say. If you want something, ask for it. If you don't want something, say so clearly.
Don't leave people guessing.
Exactly. Directness is valued. Getting to the point is considered respectful of people's time. Hedging and beating around the bush can be seen as evasive or even dishonest. But Taarof operates in a completely different register. In the world of Taarof, directness can be rude. Refusing an offer immediately can be disrespectful. Accepting something too eagerly can be embarrassing. The surface meaning of what someone says may be entirely different from what they actually want or intend.
This is already making my head spin a little in a fascinating way.
And that's the honest reaction of anyone encountering Taarof for the first time. It requires you to hold two levels of communication in your mind simultaneously: what is being said on the surface and what is actually meant underneath. And the skill of navigating those two levels gracefully is something Iranians develop from childhood and spend their entire lives refining.
Let's get concrete. Give me an example of Taarof in action. What does it actually look like?
Perfect. Let's start with the most classic example because it captures the essence beautifully. Imagine you visit an Iranian home. You've had a wonderful time, you've been fed beautifully, the conversation has been warm and generous. When it's time to leave, your host says, and I want you to imagine this being said with complete warmth and sincerity, "This house is yours. Please stay as long as you like. In fact, why don't you move in? Everything here is for you."
And they don't actually mean that literally.
They do not mean that literally. This is Taarof. The host is expressing through extravagant language how welcome you are, how honored they are by your presence, how generous they feel toward you. It is a performance of hospitality and warmth. The socially correct response is not to say, "Oh, thank you, I'll take the guest room." The correct response is to refuse graciously, to thank them, to express your own gratitude, and to leave. If you actually tried to take them up on the offer, everyone would be deeply embarrassed.
So the offer isn't meant to be accepted.
In most cases of Taarof, the offer is a gesture, a social ritual whose purpose is to communicate warmth and respect, not to actually transfer ownership of a house or insist you stay for another week. And both parties understand this. The guest understands that the offer is Taarof. The host understands that the refusal is expected. The whole exchange functions to maintain the warmth and dignity of the relationship.
Okay, give me another example. Maybe something more everyday.
Classic everyday Taarof. You're at a shop in Iran. You buy something, you hand over the money, and the shopkeeper says, "Gable nadare," which translates roughly as, "It's not worthy," or "Don't bother with payment." They wave away your money. They say the item is a gift. They insist they couldn't possibly accept payment.
And yet the shop needs to make money.
The shop absolutely needs to make money. This is Taarof. The shopkeeper is performing generosity, expressing that the relationship with the customer is more important than the transaction. The customer's correct response is to insist on paying, to say, "No, no, please, I must pay." The shopkeeper might refuse again. The customer insists again. And after this brief ritual back and forth, which can last anywhere from a few seconds to a minute or two, the customer pays, the shopkeeper accepts, and everyone has maintained dignity and warmth.
So there's this ritualized negotiation happening where both parties know the script but still have to perform it.
Perfectly described. It's almost theatrical, a scripted performance that everyone knows is scripted, but that still carries genuine meaning. The meaning is not in the literal content of the words, but in the act of performing the ritual itself. By going through the motions of Taarof, you are saying, "I value this relationship. I respect you. I am a person of good character who knows how to conduct themselves in society."
What happens if you're a foreigner or someone who doesn't know about Taarof and you take the offer at face value?
Several things can happen, ranging from mild awkwardness to genuine social embarrassment. If you accept an offer that was Taarof, if you say "yes, please" when the expected answer was "no, thank you," you put the person who offered in an uncomfortable position. They may feel obligated to follow through on something they offered only as a courtesy, or there will be an awkward pause as they try to figure out how to gracefully step back from an offer they never intended to honor.
And the foreigner in that situation has no idea why things just got weird.
Exactly. They made a perfectly logical decision by the rules of their own cultural framework. Someone offered, so they accepted. And suddenly the atmosphere has changed in a way they can't understand. This is why understanding Taarof is so important for anyone who wants to communicate effectively with Iranian people, do business in Iran, or simply understand the experience of Iranian friends and colleagues.
This also sounds like it could be exhausting. If every interaction requires you to decode whether something is genuine or Taarof, how do you ever know what's real?
This is one of the great questions that outsiders always ask, and it's a genuinely interesting one. The answer is that Iranians develop from a very young age an extraordinarily sophisticated social intuition for reading context. The way something is said, the tone, the setting, how many times it's repeated, the relationship between the people, the specific words used, all of these signals combine to tell you whether an offer is genuine or Taarof.
There are contextual cues.
Rich contextual cues. If a close friend offers you help moving apartments, says it in a casual, direct tone, and then follows up a week later asking what time to arrive, that's a genuine offer. If an acquaintance waves their hand and says, "My home is your home, come anytime," in a warm but formulaic way at the end of a conversation, that's Taarof. The difference is usually quite clear to someone who grew up in the culture.
But for someone coming from outside, it can be genuinely confusing.
Genuinely confusing, yes. And this is why many Iranians who interact regularly with non-Iranians develop the habit of what you might call breaking Taarof, stepping out of the ritual mode and saying something like, "No, really, I mean it, please come for dinner," or "No, this is Taarof, you don't have to pay." They're explicitly signaling whether the offer is genuine or ritualistic.
Let's talk about the linguistic dimension, because Taarof isn't just behavioral, it's actually built into the Persian language itself, isn't it?
This is one of the most fascinating aspects of Taarof for linguists and language learners. Persian has elaborate grammatical structures specifically designed to express social hierarchy and deference through language. There are different verb forms, different pronouns, different vocabulary choices that encode the relative social status of the speaker and listener directly into the grammar.
Similar to formal and informal pronouns in European languages, like vous and tu in French?
Similar in concept, but far more elaborate in practice. In French, you choose between vous and tu. In Persian, the distinctions are much more nuanced and extend beyond just pronouns to entire vocabulary choices. There are words you use for a superior that you would never use for an equal, and words you use about yourself in formal contexts that indicate humility.
Give me an example.
When speaking to someone senior or in a formal context, you wouldn't say the equivalent of "what do you want?" You might use a phrase that translates to something closer to "what would be your command?" or "what would be your wish?" The grammatical form itself performs deference and respect. And this isn't considered strange or excessive, it's simply the appropriate register for the social context.
And all of this is connected to Taarof as a broader social system.
Taarof and the grammar of Persian politeness are two expressions of the same underlying cultural value. The idea that social harmony, the maintenance of dignity for everyone in an interaction, and the expression of respect through language are not just nice to have, but are moral obligations. To communicate well in Persian, to be considered a person of good character, you must know how to deploy these linguistic tools appropriately.
Let's talk about where Taarof comes from historically. This didn't appear out of nowhere.
Taarof has deep roots in Persian culture and history. The word itself comes from Arabic. It's related to the Arabic root for knowing or recognition, but the practice is distinctively Persian and has been part of Iranian social life for centuries. Some scholars trace its roots to the court culture of the great Persian empires, the Achaemenid, Sasanian, and later the courts of medieval Persian dynasties.
Court culture, that makes sense. Courts are environments where protocol and the performance of hierarchy and respect are absolutely essential.
Exactly. In imperial courts, how you spoke to the king, how you addressed nobles, how you expressed submission and loyalty through language and gesture, these were matters of literal life and death. These elaborate courtly protocols of these great Persian civilizations filtered down into everyday social interaction over centuries, becoming democratized, spreading from the court to the merchant class to ordinary people.
So, Taarof is in some ways a gift from ancient royal protocol to everyday life.
A beautiful way to put it. And this historical depth is part of why Taarof feels so natural and unremarkable to Iranians who grow up with it. It is simply the water they swim in. It is how civilized, respectful people communicate. It carries the weight of thousands of years of Persian cultural refinement.
Let's talk about the relationship between Taarof and hospitality specifically, because Iranian hospitality is legendary.
It genuinely is, and Taarof is inseparable from it.
Iranian culture places hospitality among the highest of social virtues. The guest is considered almost sacred. There's a phrase in Persian culture, the guest is a gift from God. The obligation to make a guest feel welcome, honored, and cared for is not merely a social nicety, it is a moral and in many ways spiritual imperative.
And Taarof is the language through which that hospitality is expressed.
Taarof is the grammar of hospitality, the extravagant offers, eat more, this is nothing, please have everything, are the linguistic expression of a genuine cultural value. And what's important to understand is that while the specific offers may be taarof, the underlying warmth is completely real. The host genuinely wants you to feel welcome. The shopkeeper genuinely likes you as a customer. The friend genuinely values your relationship. Taarof is not hypocrisy, it is a formalized, ritualized language for expressing genuine feelings of warmth and respect.
That's an important distinction. It's not empty politeness, it's a stylized expression of something real.
That distinction is crucial, and it's one that people sometimes miss when they encounter Taarof for the first time and conclude that Iranians are somehow insincere or indirect in a deceptive way. The insincerity, if we want to call it that, is at the level of the literal content of the words. No one is actually giving you their house. But the sincerity is at the level of the feeling being expressed. You are genuinely valued, genuinely welcome, genuinely important to this person.
So learning to read Taarof means learning to hear the feeling beneath the words, not just the words themselves.
And that's actually a skill that makes you a better communicator in any language and any culture. The ability to hear what someone is actually communicating at the level of relationship and feeling, rather than just processing the literal content of their words, is one of the most valuable social and linguistic skills a person can develop.
Let's talk about the challenges Taarof creates in cross-cultural situations, particularly in professional and business contexts, because I imagine this can create real misunderstandings.
Real misunderstandings, sometimes with significant consequences. Let me give you a few scenarios. First, negotiations. In Western business culture, when someone makes an offer, the expectation is that they mean it literally. If a business partner says, "We could potentially offer you a discount," you might take that as a real possibility to explore. But if an Iranian business partner says something similar in a Taarof register as a gesture of goodwill and relationship building rather than a concrete proposal, and you respond by immediately trying to lock in the discount, the Iranian partner may feel confused, pressured, or even that you're being rude by pushing too hard on what was a social gesture.
And the Western business person has no idea they did anything wrong.
No idea at all. From their perspective, they responded logically to an offer. From the Iranian perspective, they violated the unspoken rules of how offers and negotiations are supposed to unfold, through a gradual process of relationship building, not immediate transactional pressure.
What about the opposite problem? Someone from a Taarof culture saying yes when they mean no, or agreeing to something they actually can't or won't do.
This is a real challenge. Taarof includes a strong norm against saying a flat, direct no to someone, particularly a superior or someone you want to maintain a good relationship with. Saying no directly can feel rude, confrontational, or disrespectful. So instead, someone operating in a Taarof register might say something like, "I'll see what I can do," or "Let me look into that," or "Perhaps it will be possible," meaning from their cultural framework, a polite no, but which an English-speaking listener will interpret as a tentative yes and then feel deceived or let down when it doesn't happen.
That could genuinely damage a professional relationship. Each side thinks the other has behaved badly, when actually they're just operating with completely different communication frameworks.
Completely different frameworks, and neither side is being dishonest or manipulative. They're just speaking different social languages. The Iranian side is being polite by softening a refusal into a non-committal response. The Western side is interpreting that non-committal response as an intention to follow through. The disconnect is at the level of cultural code, not character.
This is why cultural intelligence, the ability to understand and navigate different cultural frameworks, is such a vital skill in our globalized world.
One of the most vital. And the good news is that cultural intelligence is learnable. Understanding that Taarof exists, that there are cultures where the social function of language is different from what you're used to, is itself a huge step. You don't have to become a master of Taarof to benefit from knowing it exists. You just have to know that when an Iranian colleague says, "Let me see what I can do," it might be worth following up with a direct, gentle question. "I want to make sure I understand. Do you think this will actually be possible, or are there obstacles?"
You're giving them permission to be direct, essentially.
You're creating a space for direct communication without forcing them to be abrupt in a way that feels rude in their framework. That kind of cultural bridge building is what really sophisticated intercultural communication looks like.
I want to explore something you touched on earlier, the idea that Taarof is particularly pronounced in Iranian culture, but that similar systems exist elsewhere. Can you talk about that?
This is fascinating comparative territory. The underlying dynamic of Taarof, ritualized offers, expected refusals, indirect communication as a form of respect, is not unique to Iran. You see similar patterns in Japanese culture, where direct refusal is also considered rude, and people use indirect language to signal no without saying it. In many East Asian cultures, the concept of face, social dignity for all parties, drives similar communication patterns.
Face is a concept that comes up a lot in cross-cultural communication discussions.
Enormously important. The concept of face, maintaining one's own dignity and the dignity of others in social interaction, is central to many non-Western communication cultures. Taarof is fundamentally a face-maintaining system. By offering extravagantly and refusing graciously, both parties protect each other's dignity. No one is left feeling like they asked for too much, or gave too little, or were rejected, or were greedy.
Everyone walks away with their dignity intact.
Everyone walks away with their dignity intact. And when you frame it that way, when you understand that the entire elaborate performance is in service of that goal, Taarof stops seeming confusing or indirect and starts seeming genuinely sophisticated. It is a system developed over centuries precisely because human dignity is fragile and social harmony requires constant maintenance.
That's a profound reframe. Taarof is not evasion, it's protection.
It's protection of the individual, of the relationship, of the social fabric. And understanding that changes everything about how you respond to it.
Let's talk about Taarof in the diaspora, because millions of Iranians live outside Iran, and they carry Taarof with them. How does it translate or transform in a new cultural environment?
This is one of the richest dimensions of the Taarof story, and it's something that many Iranians in diaspora navigate with real complexity. On one hand, Taarof is so deeply embedded in Iranian identity and social feeling that many diaspora Iranians find it impossible to fully abandon. It would feel like abandoning something essential about who they are, how they show love and respect, how they connect with other Iranians.
On the other hand, operating in full Taarof mode in a Western workplace or social setting can cause the misunderstandings we talked about.
Exactly. So many diaspora Iranians develop a kind of code switching, operating in a more direct mode in their professional and mainstream social lives, while switching back into Taarof when they're with family, with Iranian friends, or in explicitly Iranian cultural contexts. The Taarof is preserved, but in a container, deployed selectively.
And for the children of Iranian immigrants, the second generation, this can be a site of real cultural negotiation.
Profoundly so. A second-generation Iranian-American teenager might find their grandmother's elaborate Taarof embarrassing at first. The insistence that guests eat more, the extravagant offers, the ritual refusals that their non-Iranian friends find baffling. And yet, as they get older, many come to understand and even cherish Taarof as a connection to something deep and beautiful in their heritage.
The embarrassment becoming appreciation across time.
That's the arc for many diaspora children with any cultural tradition that sets them apart. What felt like an obstacle in adolescence becomes a source of pride and identity in adulthood, and Taarof in particular, because it is so distinctively Persian, because it carries so much cultural history and sophistication, becomes something many diaspora Iranians feel genuinely proud of, a marker of a civilization that understood human dignity and relationship in a profound way.
Let's bring this back to the English language specifically, because our listeners are English learners, and I want to make sure we give them practical tools. How do you explain Taarof to an English speaker? What's the vocabulary for discussing it?
Great question. When explaining Taarof to an English-speaking audience, the most useful framing phrases include ritualized politeness, social code, indirect communication, face-saving behavior, performative generosity, ceremonial offer, cultural script, and social harmony. These are all English concepts that partially map onto aspects of Taarof.
You might say, in Iranian culture, there's a sophisticated system of ritualized politeness called Taarof, in which offers are often performative rather than literal, and indirect refusals are preferred over blunt rejections.
That's an excellent explanation, clear, respectful, and accurate. You could also say Taarof is a Persian social code that prioritizes maintaining the dignity of all parties in an interaction, often through elaborate courtesy rituals that function differently from the literal meaning of the words used.
The key is not to imply that it's deceptive or confusing in a negative way, but to frame it as a sophisticated alternative system.
Framing matters enormously. Iranians say things they don't mean is a dismissive and inaccurate framing. Iranian communication culture includes a sophisticated system of ritual politeness in which the social function of an utterance may differ from its literal content. That's respectful, accurate, and intellectually engaging.
And it invites further curiosity rather than closing down the conversation.
That's always the goal in cross-cultural discussion, framing that opens rather than closes. And understanding Taarof is itself a profound exercise in that opening. It takes you out of the assumption that your own cultural communication norms are universal or natural, and shows you that there are many sophisticated ways for human beings to speak to each other.
Any final thought before vocabulary, Jane?
Just this. One of the things I love most about Taarof is what it reveals about what Iranian culture values at the deepest level. Not efficiency, not bluntness, not getting to the point as fast as possible, but the dignity of every person in the room, the warmth of the relationship, the acknowledgement that you are in the presence of someone who matters and that the way you speak to them should honor that. In a world that races past these moments, where communication is compressed into texts and notifications and 5-second voice messages, there is something genuinely beautiful about a culture that built an entire elaborate system to say, simply, you matter, I see you, and I will take the time to show you that through the way I speak to you. Taarof is love, expressed through language.
I don't think I can follow that. Let's go to vocabulary.
Word 1. Etiquette. This noun refers to the customary code of polite behavior in a society or among members of a particular profession or group. Example: understanding Taarof is essential for anyone who wants to navigate Iranian social etiquette with confidence and respect. Pronounced et-i-ket. The word comes from French and was originally used to describe the formal rules of conduct at royal courts, which makes it particularly fitting for Taarof, given its courtly origins. Etiquette is distinct from mere manners. It implies a codified, learnable system of expected behaviors rather than just general kindness. Word 2. Reciprocity. This noun refers to the practice of exchanging things with others for mutual benefit, a give-and-take dynamic, in which favors, gestures, and obligations flow in both directions. Example: Taarof operates on a deep principle of reciprocity. Both parties perform courtesy toward each other, maintaining the balance of the relationship. Pronounced res I pros I t. The adjective is reciprocal. Reciprocity is one of the foundational concepts in social science, anthropology, and economics. It underlies gift-giving, hospitality, and many forms of social bonding across cultures. Word 3. Deference. This noun means humble submission and respect shown toward another person, particularly one of higher social status or authority. Example: the linguistic structures of Persian encode deference directly into the grammar, requiring speakers to choose words that reflect the relative status of the people in the conversation. Pronounced deference. The verb is defer, as in, I defer to your judgment. Deference is distinct from mere politeness. It implies a recognition of hierarchy and a willingness to subordinate oneself, at least linguistically, to another. Word 4. Performative. This adjective describes something that functions as a performance, an act that accomplishes something social through the act of being performed, rather than through its literal content. Example: in Taarof, many offers are performative rather than literal. They accomplish the social work of expressing warmth and respect, regardless of whether they are taken up. Pronounced performative. This is a term borrowed from linguistics and philosophy. The philosopher J.L. Austin developed the concept of performative speech acts to describe utterances that do things rather than just describe things. Knowing this word will impress anyone you discuss language or culture with. Word 5. Nuance. This noun refers to a subtle difference in meaning, expression, or sound, a slight shade of distinction that requires sensitivity and attention to perceive. Example: navigating Taarof requires enormous sensitivity to nuance. The same words can mean completely different things depending on context, relationship, and tone. Pronounced nuance. The adjective is nuanced. This is one of the most valuable words in the English language for discussing culture, language, art, and human relationships. Anytime something is complex, layered, and resistant to simple explanation, nuanced is the word you want. Word 6. Implicit. This adjective means suggested or understood without being directly stated, contained in the nature of something rather than made explicit. Example: in Taarof, the real meaning of communication is often implicit, understood by both parties without needing to be spelled out literally. Pronounced implicit. The contrast is with explicit, directly stated, clearly expressed. Much of human communication is implicit. We rely on shared context, cultural knowledge, and social intuition to fill in what isn't said. Taarof makes this implicit dimension of communication unusually visible, which is one of the things that makes it so interesting to analyze. Word 7. Hierarchical. This adjective describes something organized according to a hierarchy, a system in which elements are ranked above one another by status, authority, or importance. Example: Taarof reflects a hierarchical social structure in which the relative status of speakers shapes every aspect of how they address each other. Pronounced hierarchical. The noun is hierarchy. Understanding hierarchy is essential for understanding most of the world's cultures and social systems, and for understanding why flat, egalitarian communication norms, like those valued in much of American culture, are not universal, but are themselves a specific cultural choice. Word 8. Code switching. This compound noun refers to the practice of alternating between two or more languages, dialects, or communication styles, depending on context or audience. Example: Many Iranians in diaspora engage in code switching, using Taarof-style communication with family and Iranian friends, while adopting more direct communication norms in professional settings. Pronounced code switching. This is a linguistic term for alternating between languages. Code switching has expanded to describe shifting between different cultural communication registers. It's a key concept in sociolinguistics and in discussions of multicultural identity. Word 8. Intercultural. This adjective relates to communication or relationships between people of different cultural backgrounds. Example: understanding Taarof is a vital skill for anyone engaged in intercultural communication with Iranian colleagues, partners, or friends. Pronounced intercultural. The closely related term, cross-cultural, means comparing cultures or moving between them. Intercultural competence, the ability to communicate effectively and respectfully across cultural differences, is one of the most sought-after skills in global business, diplomacy, education, and any field that involves working with people from diverse backgrounds. Word 10. Sincerity. This noun refers to the quality of being free from pretense or deceit, genuine, honest, and authentic in expression and feeling. Example: a crucial insight about Taarof is that its ritualized language does not reflect a lack of sincerity. The warmth being expressed is real, even when the literal content of the offer is not meant to be taken at face value. Pronounced sincerity. The adjective is sincere. The relationship between sincerity and social ritual is one of the deep philosophical questions that Taarof raises. It challenges the assumption that sincere communication must always be literal and direct, and suggests that ritual and genuine feeling can coexist beautifully.
Jane, that was genuinely one of the most mind-expanding conversations I've had on this podcast. I feel like I understand not just Taarof, but something fundamental about how human communication actually works.
That's the gift that studying something like Taarof gives you. It holds up a mirror to your own assumptions about language and shows you that the way you communicate is not the only way, not the natural way, not the right way, just one way among many extraordinary human ways of reaching toward each other.
And knowing about Taarof makes you a more sensitive, more perceptive, more genuinely respectful communicator, not just with Iranians, but with everyone.
Because once you understand that the surface of communication and the depth of communication can be different, and that sometimes the most important thing being said is what isn't said literally, you start hearing people differently, more carefully, more generously.
Now, we want to hear from you. And today's question is one I am genuinely excited about. Have you ever experienced something like Taarof in your own culture? Is there a system of ritual politeness in your society that works differently from what you say on the surface? Or if you're Iranian, what's your favorite example of Taarof, or a moment when Taarof created a funny or surprising misunderstanding?
Share your stories in the comments below. This is exactly the kind of question where your personal experience is the most interesting thing in the room. No textbook can compete with your story. We read every single comment and we genuinely learn from what you share.
If today's episode opened your mind, gave you new English vocabulary, or made you see communication differently, please give us a thumbs up right now. It costs you nothing and it helps Easy Talk reach so many more people around the world.
Subscribe to Easy Talk if you haven't already and turn on notifications. We have beautiful episodes coming and you do not want to miss them.
Share this episode with someone who loves language, culture, or Iran. Share it with a friend who does business internationally. Share it with anyone who wants to understand the world more deeply.
Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at @EasyTalkPodcast for daily vocabulary, cultural insights, and a warm, curious, global community of English learners.
And visit easytalkpodcast.com for transcripts, vocabulary guides, and all the resources you need to keep building your English.
Here's today's thought to carry with you. Language is never just information, it is always also relationship. The words you choose, the way you phrase things, the silences you hold, and the ones you fill, all of it is communicating something about how you see the person in front of you, how much you value them, what kind of world you want to create with them. Taarof knows this, and now so do you.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Jane.
This has been Easy Talk. Until next time, speak with care, listen with depth, and never stop being curious about how other people find their words.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.